Welcome back to New Money. This evening we're discussing healthcare. My guests are Kevin Aaron and Dr. Katlego Matudi. And you'd like to email me, my address will appear on the screen. It's info@anchorcapital.co.za. Kevin, before we went off air, you were talking about how do you encourage younger members. We were talking about the problems of not being able to implement these low schemes. And then I also asked you, please explain the difference between the management of a medical aid and the actual, or the administration, and then the medical aid itself. So a few questions for you, Kevin.
Thanks, Bryan. I'm just gonna conclude on my last point, and then I'll deal with that question of yours. The one benefit of a medical aid over a health insurance product is that medical aids for hospitalization pay typically unlimited in full. So if you, for example, are in a motor vehicle accident, or we had a case in 2023 where a member of our scheme went in for a routine back surgery operation, which ended up with complications and septicemia, the bill came to 9.2 million rand. The medical aid paid it in full. You won't find that with these primary health insurance products, which typically have a limit. But just in terms of your question about the confusion, a medical aid or a medical aid scheme is a mutual entity. It's a not-for-profit organization. It's managed by a board of trustees that are elected by the members. And the administrator actually is the entity that actually then runs the medical scheme in terms of the day-to-day operations, making sure, for example, that when claims are received, they're processed, they're paid. There's call centers where members obviously can query issues, etc., etc. Where the confusion really, in my opinion, has come out is because the largest player in the industry, Discovery, has the same name as the medical scheme. So you have Discovery Health, which is the administrator, and you have Discovery Health Medical Scheme, which is the scheme. You also have with Momentum, you have Momentum Health, which is the administrator, and you have Momentum Health Medical Scheme. So that's where actually people get confused. They don't understand what's the difference between the scheme and the administrator. But what the Council for Medical Schemes has done is they've stopped that. So if, for example, the likes of a Sanlam wanted to create a medical scheme now, they would not be allowed to call it Sanlam Health Medical Scheme. But because we already have this practice in the market, and that's where the majority of people get confused. They don't understand because the administrator typically as Discovery is called Discovery, and the scheme is Discovery. But there's a very, very clear distinction between the two. Both of them are regulated by the Council for Medical Schemes. But as I say, the scheme is a not-for-profit entity managed by a board of trustees that provide oversight typically on governance, and then the administrator is paid an administration fee to effectively run the scheme in terms of its day-to-day operations.
Thanks, Kevin. Katlego, are all medical schemes members of the Board of Healthcare Funders?
No. We have the majority of the closed schemes and a number of the open schemes. The market is split at about 55-45% in our favor. There is another organization that does similar functions to us. We, however, also have membership outside the borders of South Africa, so we have the advantage of having that regional perspective. But not all members are part of our organizations, and even these two organizations, there are some schemes that are actually fending for themselves.
So if they're not all members, how does your organization run? Do those that are members, do they pay an annual fee? How do you raise your funds to run Board of Healthcare Funders?
So there are levies that are predetermined, and all the member organizations, and depending on whether you're a scheme or an administrator or managed care organizations, there are levies that are paid based on your membership. We also then have different classes of members. There are those who enjoy what you call full membership, and some are associate members. And this bracket contains those that are typically not funders, and they play the role, the supportive role to the schemes.
Okay, well, let me get on to the emails. Kevin, my first email is to you from James in Bryan. He says, when it comes to elective surgery, does it make sense to ask for a quote prior to being admitted to hospital and then getting information from your medical aids as to what they will pay? If there's a big gap, how do you suggest I fill that gap?
Thanks, Bryan. Yes, definitely. So I think the first thing is that not all medical scheme options cover all elective surgery. So the first thing, obviously, is that a member needs to ensure that the option they're on will cover a particular type of elective surgery. And again, that's why it's so important that people actually really pay attention to what option they're going to choose when they choose a medical aid. Elective surgery typically happens with older people. So again, it's important that they take maybe a more comprehensive option. It is very important to get a quote. First of all, to know, what it's going to cost. And second of all, also to then look and see what the medical aid is going to pay. What you typically find is that the hospital component is paid in full, but the specialist component, unless the medical scheme has specialist arrangements or contracts with specialists, you typically find that specialists will charge in excess of the medical scheme rate. And that will be for the member's account. So again, there's two things that one can do. The one is that the member can actually negotiate with the specialist, and you can do that, to negotiate a lower rate on the basis that there's going to be a member copay. And the second thing is obviously that members can take out gap cover, because gap cover will cover the specialist component of in-hospital claims, typically to the level of what a medical scheme won't pay. So if a medical scheme has got contracts with specialists, that would then cap what the specialist would charge, and typically the medical scheme would pay in full. There would be no copay, but there are many times, especially if there aren't specialist arrangements in place, where the specialist, and again, that's one of the challenges. If it's a PMB, for example, the specialist can charge anything he wants. The medical scheme has to pay in full. If it's not a PMB, the specialist can charge typically 400-500% of the medical scheme rate. The medical scheme will pay its scheme rate, and the member will be liable for the shortfall. So very important, know what you're getting in for, negotiate a better price, and very importantly, ensure that you have gap cover as a standard with your medical scheme product.
Kevin, I think there's another thing that could happen. Most schemes do have network doctors who will charge tariff, or whatever you call tariff today, and you could ask the medical aid, what doctors have you got as a network doctor so I can reduce my cost? I know it's awkward, difficult, because individuals find it hard to negotiate. The doctor's taking your life in their hands, and you're now negotiating. Difficult, Kevin.
Yes, Bryan, it is. But we are finding more and more that people are negotiating because of the affordability issue. But you're absolutely right. I mean, most medical schemes have put in place GP networks. And, I want to stress that a network doesn't mean lower quality. It often means better quality because, first of all, you've negotiated a rate with the GP. And in most cases, besides the fact that you've got a contract with the GP, most medical schemes actually profile those GPs. So we actually profile them for quality, in terms of quality of care and outcomes, and also for cost. But not every medical scheme has put in place a network of specialists.
Katlego, just a question from your side. You've got a whole lot of new drugs coming onto the market, drugs that have been approved globally, which are so costly. How do you deal with this at Board of Healthcare funders with medical aids?
The problem of high cost drugs, I think, has been there for a long time. We have initiated a process which is riding on the back of discussions that we've had with the Department of Health and other industry players over the last few years, and this was premised initially on rare diseases. So we are designing a reinsurance product that will work almost like a risk equalization matrix, which will make it easy for schemes to first make available treatment for those rare conditions that are ordinarily, some of them are not PMB, and even those that are PMB, you find are very expensive. So schemes would then be able to participate in this arrangement, where we would initially choose a basket of these high-cost drugs that we can pay for. The second thing that the industry has been contemplating for a while is for us to have an agreement on health technology assessment. And this technology obviously includes medicines. It means that we would have an input on firstly the analysis that leads to the price determination, and secondly on the appropriate utilization by designing specific protocols for usage of these drugs. The third element is that there is a need, and this is on the back of the recommendation from the Health Market Inquiry, that the industry needs to
I'm really
have.
sorry. I'm going to have to stop you there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I did make mention at the start of the program how costs of medical schemes over the next 8 to 16 years are going to render most South Africans unable to maintain their current medical scheme. The dilemma that many face is how to strike the right balance of easy access to quality healthcare and affordability. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for members to understand their benefits and to get a full appreciation to see whether they're on the right plan or not. Do not take future costs lightly. Engage with a medical aid broker to do this evaluation. It's not a one-off advice, but it's ongoing. Kevin and Katlego, thank you for joining me this evening. It's important to note that our program is to provide information and should not be construed as advice. Next week's program will be focusing on estate planning, and if you need to get hold of me, my details will appear on the screen. Thank you for watching, and good night.